If you vanished, no one would notice. She said it like she was complimenting the weather, dry, flippant, like it had no weight. Just another casual jab across the worn tile between us. While she waited for the Keurig to finish burping out her vanilla brew, I'd just finished washing her plate. Yes, her plate. She always left it. Somehow my fork and knife always made it into the dishwasher. But hers? No, that one was sacred. A minor thing. But minor things accumulate, don't they? She stood there, barefoot in leggings, scrolling through her phone like I didn't exist. Then that sentence. That smirk. And I realized something. She wasn't joking. Not really. There was truth buried in the way her lips curled. In the tone she reserved for talking to people she didn't respect. If you vanished, no one would notice. So I vanished. No slamming doors. No loud speeches. No melodrama. I dried my hands, folded the dish towel precisely. Habit, not emotion, and walked out the side door. The one that doesn't creak. By noon, I had already erased myself. Resigned from the firm formally, clinically. I told HR I was pursuing a personal opportunity abroad. The woman sounded half asleep. Probably forgot my name the moment she hit submit. My work badge was already in the shredder. Cloud access revoked. I pulled everything from our joint account. Legally, cleanly, months ago. She just never noticed. I'd been planning a sabbatical. All that changed was the timeline. And the intent. She didn't text. Didn't call. Why would she? She thought she'd won whatever imaginary fight we were in. In her mind, I was probably sulking somewhere, maybe in the basement or car. Men like me always came back, didn't we? Tail tucked, head down. By 4 p.m., I was off-grid. No GPS. No card swipes. No social posts. Just gone. And still no ping from her. Funny thing, she was right. Nobody noticed. Not that day. Except maybe you. Since more than 97% of you reading this haven't subscribed yet, and you're still here, still listening, consider hitting that button. It helps the team behind this bring you more stories like this one. And hey, someone should notice, right? Anyway, back to it. That night, I imagined her reheating leftovers alone. Probably watching one of those true crime shows she likes, joking about how men always leave a trace. She probably thought I'd be back by Friday. Saturday, tops. She didn't realize I wasn't trying to disappear to punish her. I did it to test something. Because here's the part no one likes to admit. Sometimes we want to vanish. Just to see who looks for us. Who actually sees us. Spoiler, she didn't. At least not right away. Not when it mattered. It was disturbingly easy, honestly. I've been making myself small for years. Bending around her moods. Shrinking when her mother visited. Vanishing bit by bit, like steam off a coffee mug. So when I went all the way, it barely felt like a transition. More like a logical conclusion. I'd always joked about becoming a ghostwriter. Or a consultant for clients who didn't want their names on anything. Turns out, it's easier to be invisible when you've practiced every day. She gave me that gift, in a way. Made me unimportant enough that, when I finally stepped out of frame, the camera didn't even stutter. The first 24 hours felt like holding my breath underwater. Not from fear, more like anticipation. I wondered when the ripples would hit her. The empty bed. The voicemail. The calendar reminder to pick up dry cleaning with no one to receive it. Would it register? Or would she just chalk it up to me being dramatic? I'd spent years watching her dismiss things. Friends. Feelings. Me. She had this talent for rewriting the moment to fit her version of the script. He's just tired. He's always been like this. He doesn't mind. But what if I tore the pages out completely? I didn't leave out of rage. I left out of curiosity. Because when someone tells you that you don't matter, when they dare you to prove it, it's amazing how much clarity you gain once you're finally quiet. And the best part? She had no idea that by the time she started to worry, I'd already begun phase 2. The first time she called, it rang once, then dropped to silence. No voicemail. No, this number has been disconnected. Just a soft mechanical click, like the phone itself was embarrassed to let her through. She frowned, waited a beat, then tried again. Same thing. We'd been in the same house for 14 years. Shared accounts, streaming services, a Costco card, Spotify playlists with decade-old road trip songs. I disappeared in less than 8 hours. The email linked to our smart thermostat bounced back. Her Uber showed a new default card. Hulu asked her to re-enter the password. It wasn't wrong. It had just been reset. And the new security question. She wouldn't have known the answer, even if she cared enough to guess. She never asked about my childhood. Never met the aunt I used as the backup contact. That morning, she rolled her eyes. Told her Pilates group I was off doing his man cave routine again. The kind of performative martyrdom that buys fake sympathy. He gets like this when he doesn't feel special enough, she'd said, smiling. They all nodded, laughed, but no one asked how she knew I was okay. No one asked why she didn't seem worried. Because she wasn't. Not yet. The dog food delivery stopped. The mechanic texted to say I'd canceled my oil change appointment. Under a different number. She deleted the text. By the third day, she checked the Ring doorbell history. Nothing. No motion detected since Thursday morning. That's when she noticed the car wasn't in the garage. First, she assumed I was at a hotel. That maybe I needed space. She even joked about it to our neighbor, Stan, the retired one with the drone obsession and the binoculars. He's probably at that awful motel near the freeway, she'd said. The one with the sad continental breakfast. But then Stan squinted and said, I haven't seen his car since Thursday. Didn't see it come back either. Her smile faltered. She poured herself a second glass of wine that night. The good kind. The kind she usually hoarded for girls' night. That was the moment it hit her. Not grief. Not even panic. Just a low thrum in the gut. Like something was off. Like the silence was stretching too far. She started testing things. My toothbrush was gone. My cologne was gone. But not everything, just what I used. The things that mattered to me. The things she ignored. The closet was half empty. Not messy. Curated. She hadn't noticed because she only ever threw her laundry on top of mine. But now the pattern was broken. Fewer hangers. The coat she always hated, gone. The bills still got paid. The lawn still got trimmed. But she couldn't log into the account that handled them. The bank said it had been moved to a new structure. Legal, they assured her. Routine. She tried to argue. They offered to send paperwork. She declined. The gym called her that Friday, asking if she'd like to convert his locker. We assumed you knew, the woman said. He formally terminated the membership. Even mailed back the lock. That word, formally, stuck in her throat. The group chat of our couple friends started asking questions. Where's he been hiding? You two fighting again? Tell him he still owes me a rematch on trivia night. She replied with a laughing emoji. Then silence. She didn't know what else to say. Because I wasn't hiding. I was absent. Not evading her. Not ghosting her. I had ceased to exist in her world, but done it so neatly, so clinically, it was hard to label it as anything other than precision. She tried my sister next. A strained call. He's just taking time, my sister said flatly. Don't worry about him. He's always been resourceful. Which wasn't a comfort. It was a warning. That night, she tried to open the safe in the bedroom. The one she always mocked. What do you even keep in there? She'd scoffed once, trying the wrong combination out of boredom. Now she really wanted to know. Too bad I changed it 6 months ago. She never noticed the subtle click in the code dial. She slept on my side of the bed that night. I don't know why. Maybe to feel something. Maybe to erase the emptiness. But the silence wasn't just absence anymore. It was intentional. Crafted. And now it hummed through the drywall into the foundation. Something had shifted. She wasn't scared yet. But fear was close. The insurance call was supposed to be routine. The kind of bureaucratic annoyance she usually shoved my way. Renewals, coverage updates, deductible discussions she never cared about. But now that I was off-grid, as she'd started calling it, she was the one stuck on hold for 22 minutes before a chipper voice finally answered. Ah yes, that policy was transferred out of joint ownership in June. June? She repeated, blinking at the calendar. It's October. Yes, ma'am. All perfectly filed. We mailed the documents to the P.O. box listed on the form. What P.O. box? She snapped. The agent paused. It's registered under the LLC that assumed ownership of the policy. Do you need the entity name? She did not. She ended the call with a brittle thank you, tossed the phone onto the couch, and stared at nothing for a solid minute. I could imagine her face. Tension in the jaw, that little twitch in her left eye when she didn't understand something but hated admitting it. She probably poured herself a drink. Something brown and smoky to match the growing irritation clawing through her. She was used to control. Maybe not in the loud, dominant way, but in the petty, dismissive way that cuts deeper. The way that rewrites reality with a single shrug. She decided which restaurant we went to, which vacation photos we kept, which stories she told about us to her friends. I was always the background character, the flavorless husband who meant well. And yet suddenly the flavorless husband had a P.O. box, and an LLC, and a paper trail she couldn't follow. 2 days later her bank called. An account manager with a voice like elevator music told her that the lien on her home equity line had been released. "We just need you to sign the final verification of release paperwork." "What lien?" she asked. Polite pause. "The lien placed by your partner's collateral trust. It was holding against the property as a contingency in the event of..." He trailed off, searching for the right word. "Default?" she offered. "Separation," he said instead, gently. She hung up without signing anything. Then she drove straight to her lawyer's office, makeup half done, coat inside out. She wasn't angry. Not yet. She was confused. And confusion for her was dangerous. It meant she couldn't decide who to blame. And when she couldn't assign blame, she imploded. "I don't understand this," she told her lawyer. A woman she'd hired mostly for her jewelry and "don't F with me" energy. "He's not this tactical. He still thinks routers are magic. I once caught him trying to Google. He's not clever enough for this." But her voice wavered on clever, because she knew me well enough to remember. I don't rage. I don't explode. I study. I wait. And I don't show my hand until the game's already over. That same afternoon, she logged into our old tax records. Or tried to. Her access had expired. The tax preparer, someone she never bothered to meet, politely declined to resend the link. "We've received updated authorization forms. I'm afraid we're only permitted to discuss those accounts with the listed principal." She was starting to see the board now. Not all the pieces, but enough to realize that her king wasn't safe. In a rare moment of vulnerability, she texted my brother. The one she always called the broke one. She sent him a message that simply read, "Have you heard from him?" He replied 3 hours later, "He's fine." That was it. No location. No explanation. No window to pry open. The next morning, she opened the safe again. Still locked. Still taunting her. She dug through my old files trying to find the combination, or maybe a hint. Anything. Instead, she found something worse. A document, dated 18 months earlier. A trust agreement. Signed. Notarized. Filed. It detailed the reallocation of certain non-liquid assets in the event of prolonged absence, incapacitation, or dissolution of marriage. It even used those exact terms. Dissolution. So polite. So legal. So final. She hadn't noticed any of this before, because she thought I was predictable. She thought I was tired, passive, foggy. But that's the mistake people make when they confuse silence for stupidity. She threw the file across the room, screamed into the empty air. For the first time, she didn't feel abandoned. She felt checkmated. And I was still 4 moves ahead. She broke on a Wednesday, 1 week and 5 hours since my exit. The silence had stretched so long it began to howl. So she did what she always did when her own efforts failed. She outsourced. This time to a private investigator named McAllen. Ex-cop. Flat-top haircut. Hands like shovels. She found him through a divorce forum she used to mock. "Only for desperate housewives," she'd once said. That morning, she filled out a quote request and checked the box. Missing spouse, no known location. McAllen met her in a quiet office above a tax prep place. Dusty blinds. Smelled like old toner and cheap cologne. He flipped through the slim folder she brought. My headshot from a company Christmas card, 2 old pay stubs, and a list of my known contacts, most of which hadn't been updated in years. "People don't just disappear," he said, glancing up at her with mild condescension, like she was describing a ghost sighting. "They hide, sure. They run. But they leave a trail. Bank charges. Traffic cams. Rental agreements. Something." He leaned back, cracking his knuckles. "I'll find him." She felt better for 6 hours. That night, her lawyer called. The same one who wore all black and liked to sip from a stainless steel flask during late appointments. She'd asked her to review the property agreements again. Especially the dumb trust thing she signed years ago. "He wanted to vanish," the lawyer said flatly, eyes on the screen. "And he knew how." "What the hell does that mean?" "It means he prepared. Nothing about this is impulsive." "You sound impressed." "I am." McAllen called her 2 days later with a voice that had lost its swagger. "Your guy's a ghost," he said. No hits on his plates. No car in impounds. No traffic cams. No phone pings. His name dropped out of payroll the same day he left. Even the DMV has nothing current. I've seen cartel guys leave more noise. She tried to scoff. You're saying he vanished into thin air? I'm saying he knew what he was doing. Most people don't plan their disappearances. They panic. They grab a bag and bolt. But your husband? He unraveled his life like thread. Quiet. Clean. Intentional. The silence on her end stretched too long. McCallan added, he didn't just leave you. He left the world you think exists. She fired him the next day. Then she spent 6 hours trying to recover his old iCloud account. Apple refused. You're not the primary. She sent the marriage license. The rep politely repeated the policy. She started digging through our wedding photos, hunting for clues. Ridiculous. What did she expect to find? A background blur of a guy in a trench coat whispering coordinates? The desperation was starting to bend her. That night, she drove to my mother's house. A 2-hour trip. My mother met her at the door with a neutral expression, arms crossed. Where is he? She demanded. He told you once, Mom said coolly, that if he ever left, it wouldn't be loud. I remember. You laughed. Called it his little man fantasy. Remember that. She did. And now you're standing here, Mom added, not because you want him back, but because you don't know what he's doing. That's what's killing you. She slammed the door before my wife could reply. That night, alone in our home, she opened every drawer I'd ever touched, pulled files from the attic, dug into backup drives and cloud folders like she was excavating a crime scene. And what she found wasn't absence. It was subtraction. Everything essential gone. Strategically. Not in a rush, not like a man running from something. Like a man building towards something. She took the dog for a walk just to feel normal again. Halfway down the block, a neighbor waved. Haven't seen him around lately, he said. Out of town. She froze. I guess, she murmured. But she knew better now. He wasn't out of town. He was out of reach. And every time she searched for him on her phone through a lawyer from a PI, she didn't find him. She found absence wearing armor. The apartment smelled like ink and salt water. 2 blocks from the docks, above a print shop run by a Vietnam vet named Hal who spoke like every word was a debt he hated to pay. I rented it under the name Marcus Hale, pulled from a gravestone I once passed during a drive upstate. No one asked questions. In towns like this, everyone's hiding from something. Ex-wives, IRS letters, the ghost of ambition. The apartment was sparse. A mattress on the floor, 1 folding chair, a coffee pot older than me, and a bookshelf I built from reclaimed pallets. I lived like a monk and it suited me. Quiet routine. No TV. Just thick law text stacked like bricks around me. I read everything. State codes. Corporate formation statutes. Tax loopholes. Case law. I didn't understand it all. Not at first, but I was patient. You'd be amazed what sticks when no one's interrupting you to ask if you remember to grab almond milk. I spent my mornings at the public library. A pale brick building that smelled like paper cuts and mildew. The older librarians noticed me quickly, but they never asked questions. I returned everything on time. I kept my head down. They liked that. One of them, Mrs. Edgerly, started slipping me old bar exam prep books from the donation shelf. Better you than the recycling bin, she'd mutter. I took it as a blessing. By month 6, I had a job bussing tables at a seafood joint that catered to tourists. By month 10, I was stocking shelves at a second-hand hardware store, under a guy named Calvin who had 4 teeth and a PhD in quiet despair. I worked 7 days a week. No days off. Not because I needed the money, but because structure was oxygen. The more sweat I gave, the more the noise from my old life evaporated. What surprised me most was how little I missed comfort. I'd lived in central air, driven a leased hybrid, sipped pour-over coffee from a machine with a Bluetooth app. None of it mattered. Not now. My new luxury was privacy. My new indulgence was progress. Quiet, untracked, and utterly mine. By the end of the first year, I'd filed a single-member LLC under the alias. Just consulting, low stakes. I helped a retired mechanic navigate zoning changes for a body shop he wanted to reopen with his grandson. No one asked for a diploma. Just results. I read the fine print. Helped him dodge a 6-month delay that would have buried the deal. He paid me in cash and whiskey. Word spread. By year 2, I was being handed handshakes and envelopes. Little businesses, auto glass, pest control, dive bar landlords, wanted to talk to the quiet guy who knew stuff. I never promised more than advice. They never asked where I came from. I liked that. By year 3, I had equity in a local marina office and half a salvage company run by a bitter divorcee named Nell who liked that I didn't flirt or lie. She gave me keys and silence, which was my kind of gratitude. And here's the twist no one saw coming. Not even me. I started to enjoy it. Not just the money. Not the quiet wins. The control. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the footnote in someone else's story. I wasn't the guy holding the camera while she posed. I was writing the script, casting the roles, producing the whole damn film, and doing it under a name I chose on ground I built. I grew a beard. Not trendy, practical. I let my hair gray at the temples. My body hardened from labor. My voice lowered. I stopped apologizing before sentences. I stopped waiting for someone to ask me how I was. No one here asked about my past. In fact, the fewer stories you tell in towns like this, the more respected you become. Everyone assumes you've seen something, done something, and that gives you power. I bought the building next to the print shop in year 4. Leased it to a guy opening a kayak rental company. I negotiated the lease personally. Clean clauses. No surprises. In year 5, I sat on the board of a local co-op. Quietly. An advisor. The mayor asked if I'd consider a spot on the Small Business Development Council. I smiled and declined. I wasn't here to be seen, but I was watching. Every day I grew stronger, she grew smaller. Not in size, but in relevance. She didn't know who I was anymore. Couldn't even imagine this version of me. If she saw me on the street, she might pause, squint, maybe think, is that? No, couldn't be. And she'd be right, because the man she dared to disappear had done just that. Only now, he was beginning to rise. The room was champagne and chatter. White linens, fake laughter, foundation over resentment. A charity luncheon at the downtown ballroom, something she'd been dragged to by a colleague's +1 cancellation. She wore a fitted cream blazer that didn't quite close at the waist anymore, drank from a mimosa she didn't want, and smirked at the guest speaker's overly sincere tone about revitalizing underutilized urban zones. She wasn't listening. Not really. She was scrolling through her messages under the table, replying to a contractor about a roof leak she couldn't afford to fix just yet. The savings account was still there, but thinner. Things had shifted since his vanishing act, in ways that were more than financial. Her friend leaned over and dropped a glossy program in her lap. Did you read this? They've got some local success stories on page 10 or something. She flipped lazily, eyes half-focused. A few smiling faces of donors. A woman with too much bronzer shaking hands with a city councilman. Then page 14. Her fingers stopped mid-turn. Her mimosa tilted. Half of it spilled across her lap, seeping cold into her dress slacks, and she didn't even flinch, because there he was. Under the heading Visionaries, Rebuilding Forgotten Districts, a man stood in profile beside a construction site, hard hat in one hand, tailored navy jacket perfectly creased, white shirt open at the collar. He looked like a campaign ad for clean power and ruthless efficiency. No name tag, no gimmick. Just this line beneath the photo. Marcus Hale, Principal Advisor, Hale Renewal Group. Her eyes locked onto the jawline. Sharper now. The chin more pronounced. Shoulders broader. There was no doubt. It was him. Not just surviving. Not hiding. Thriving. Her breath caught in her throat. The world narrowed. The banquet hall dimmed. She didn't hear the auctioneer. Didn't notice the server trying to blot her lap with a napkin. She just stared. He hadn't just left her. He had unmade himself. Rebuilt. Sharpened. Everything that had been dull polished. Everything timid hardened. He was unrecognizable in the most insulting way possible. Better. And worse? The little bio beside his name said nothing about a family. No personal history. Just corporate achievements, philanthropic initiatives. A quote about intentional growth in neglected areas. That was always his thing. He hated waste. Even now, his empire was built on it. Her friend chuckled beside her. He's hot, she said, not recognizing the man in the brochure. Bet he's got some story. Those eyes are cold as ice. She didn't respond. She couldn't, because those eyes had once looked at her with warmth, with hope, with quiet, begging loyalty. And now, here they were, printed and laminated, staring past her as if she were a ghost. She kept reading. The article mentioned he'd recently acquired 3 distressed properties in the riverfront district. One of them sounded familiar. She realized with a slow chill. It was the warehouse block they'd once dreamed of flipping together. Back then, she'd dismissed it. Too risky. Too ugly. Why waste your energy on that mess? Apparently, he hadn't forgotten. He'd bought it last year. Through an LLC she'd never heard of. The same LLC that, her stomach dropped, held the title to the land beneath her house. She folded the brochure like it was radioactive, tucking it under her thigh as if hiding it could change its truth. But the crack had already split wide. This wasn't a man retreating into the shadows. This was a man emerging. Strategically, purposefully, and worst of all, without her. She didn't sleep that night. Not from guilt. Not from heartbreak. Those had expired long ago. No, it was something uglier. It was relevance. She was no longer part of the story. Not even a chapter. Just a discarded footnote from the origin tale of someone she never really knew. She spent the night Googling everything she could find. Most results were corporate. Neutral. Sanitized. No photos beyond the ones in brochures or news blurbs. But the more she read, the more certain she became. He had rewritten himself. Not just the name. Not just the address. The essence. He wasn't trying to disappear anymore. He wanted to be seen, but only by the right eyes. Not hers. Never hers. And that, more than the leaving, more than the silence, was the real wound. He hadn't just gotten away. He'd flourished. Deliberately. Permanently. Without her. She didn't tell anyone where she was going that morning. Didn't bother with makeup. Hair scraped back. A black blouse buttoned crooked and trembling hands that gave her away at stoplights. She drove with white knuckles, stomach twisting, barely noticing the shifting cityscape around her. All she could see was the name, Hale Renewal Group. The brochure was still crumpled in her passenger seat, corners frayed from being unfolded too many times. The address led her to a street she used to avoid, once full of shuttered buildings and graffiti-tagged windows, now replaced by clean glass, polished concrete, valet signs, and minimalist fountains that gurgled like they belonged in a spa. She didn't know when it had changed. Probably when he bought it. His building stood at the end of the block, 5 stories of steel and quiet money. The kind of place where people wore suits without ties and said things like, leverage local ecosystems, while sipping espresso made by someone with a degree in interior design. She parked illegally. Didn't care. The front desk was manned by a receptionist who looked like she could bench press self-worth. Pale pink blazer. Smile professionally fixed into place. A tiny gold placard read, Jasmine. I'm here to see Mr. Hale, she said, gripping her purse too tight. Jasmine didn't blink. Do you have an appointment? No, but just tell him his wife is here. Pause. Jasmine's fingers hovered over the keyboard. And your name, she said it. Full. First and last. The way she hadn't in a long time. Jasmine typed. A few slow keystrokes. A pause. Then another. Then a blink. I'm sorry, she said evenly. Mr. Hale does not accept unscheduled personal visits. She leaned in, her voice lowering. I'm not some ex-girlfriend or stalker. I was his wife. We were married for 17 years. Jasmine's gaze didn't waver. Ma'am, I understand. But Mr. Hale has made it clear. No exceptions. She fumbled in her purse, hands shaking now, and pulled out a photo. Worn edges. 2 people standing on a beach, wind-blown and stupid with smiles. She pressed it to the glass. See? That's us. That's him. Just tell him I'm here. Jasmine didn't even look. He's in a meeting. Then I'll wait, she snapped, her voice cracking. I'll sit here until he's done. Jasmine gave a tight smile. That's your right. But I can't notify him. At that moment, footsteps echoed from beyond the glass wall. She turned, and there he was. He passed behind the frosted paneling, flanked by 2 people in suits, laughing at something. His walk steady, precise. Tailored charcoal suit, white shirt open at the neck, no tie. Same jawline, same hands, but everything else new. She moved toward the hallway, heart in her throat. Marcus! He didn't look. Not a flicker. Not even a pause in his step. He walked past her as if she were a smudge on the glass. As if she weren't real. And Jasmine, ever professional, simply stepped slightly to the side, as though to shield her from the deeper embarrassment of chasing a man who'd already decided she didn't exist. It hit her in waves. Not just the shame of being ignored. The implication. He had seen her. Of course he had. You don't spend nearly 2 decades with someone without learning the shape of their voice, the way their silhouette leans when they're bracing for rejection. He just chose not to react. No anger, no surprise, just total omission. She sat down in the minimalist lobby chair. It was cold, too low to be comfortable, the kind of chair that made you feel like a child waiting to be judged. For the next 20 minutes, she didn't move. No one came out. No one acknowledged her. And the receptionist, Jasmine, pretended to tidy her desk, politely silent, letting the humiliation harden into something permanent. Eventually, she stood, walked to the elevator. The doors reflected her face back at her, older, blotched red with embarrassment, clutching a wedding photo no one cared about. By the time the elevator opened to the parking garage, she felt it in her bones. She didn't belong in his life anymore. Not as his wife. Not even as his memory. She stormed into her new attorney's office like she was kicking down a door that had already been removed from its hinges. A younger lawyer this time. Sharper, leaner. The kind of man who wore horn-rimmed glasses and used words like unpack and precedent, while making you feel like you were the confusion in the room. She didn't like him, but he was efficient, and after the receptionist incident and the frozen bank accounts, she needed someone who didn't smile while saying, "You should have read the fine print." She dumped the file folder on his desk. "I want to contest everything," she said, breath clipped. "He tricked me. He moved things I didn't even know we owned." He didn't flinch, just nodded, steepled his fingers, and said, "Let's take a look." What he found made him lean back in his chair, adjust his glasses, and frown. Not out of concern for her, but out of professional curiosity. Like he'd stumbled onto a puzzle box no one had solved yet. "You signed this," he said, tapping one page in particular. She leaned in, squinted, recognized the notary seal, her own signature, dated 4 years ago. "I don't even remember that," she said, defensively. "We must have signed a million things over the years." He didn't look up. "You initialed every page. Here, here, and here. What is it?" "Asset reallocation in the event of separation, dissolution, or unavailability of one or both parties." She rolled her eyes. "That's just boilerplate language." He pointed at the next paragraph. "No," he said calmly. "That's intentional language. Very specific. It refers to reassigning ownership of land, business equity, and all passive income streams to independent holding structures, namely, the LLC named in this clause here." He tapped again. "Verdant Anchor LLC." She froze. That name again. It was on the tax bill for the land under her house. On the shell company that had bought the old warehouse downtown. On the trust agreement she'd shredded in a fit of wine-soaked denial 2 weeks ago. "You're saying he owned the land under our house through this thing?" He finally looked at her. "He still owns the land. You own the house. He owns the dirt." She blinked. "That's insane. Can he do that?" "He already did." He folded his hands. "And because you signed this agreement, and because it was notarized and filed with your joint estate, it's ironclad." Her laugh came out brittle. "He tricked me." "No," he said, voice like a scalpel. "He knew you wouldn't read it." She opened her mouth to argue, but the truth settled like sediment in her gut. Because of course she hadn't read it. She never read any of the paperwork. Back then, she was still riding high on the illusion of control. She thought her charm or her tone was all she needed to get her way. Documents were his thing. She made decisions. He signed forms. But this one, he'd written it for a future she couldn't even imagine. A future where she might still live in the house, but have to pay him rent just to stay on the land. Her lawyer continued, now in full clinical mode. "The LLC can, if it so chooses, decline to renew the land lease at the end of your term. That's in 17 months. At that point, he could sell the land, redevelop it, or simply refuse to allow continued residency." "You mean I could be kicked out of my own home?" He didn't flinch. "Yes." Her nails dug into the leather armrest. "This is vindictive." He tilted his head. "Or strategic. Depends on your perspective." She sat in silence. The weight of what she'd ignored finally dragging her under. That paper she'd skimmed while texting a friend. The dinner she rushed him through so she could stream her show. The dismissive wave of her hand when he asked, "Do you want to review this together?" She'd laughed. "If it's important, you'll tell me." He had, in the language she never bothered to learn. Now every foundation she stood on was borrowed. The home wasn't truly hers. The land wasn't hers. Even the equity from their old investments had been siphoned into silent structures, scattered and untraceable. She couldn't fight it. Not with rage, not with lawyers, not even with shame. All she could do was accept the worst possible realization. The man she thought of as passive, pliable, unremarkable, had been writing a different story all along. And in this chapter, she wasn't the co-author. She wasn't even mentioned. The envelope was thick linen stock, weighty like it carried consequence. Embossed gold letters across the front. Urban Renewal Awards, honoring Marcus Hale. She opened it in her car, parked outside a dry cleaner she could barely afford. Her first reaction wasn't shock. Not anymore. Not after the brochure, the safe, the LLCs. Her first reaction was a low, involuntary sound in her throat. Half laugh, half gag. He was being honored now. Celebrated. Immortalized on a stage she would never be allowed to touch. She read it twice. The date, the location, black tie. She wasn't sure why she decided to go. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the instinct to reclaim some small thread of dignity. Or maybe she just needed to see for herself that the man she once slept beside was truly gone. And not just geographically. She borrowed a gown from a former coworker who hadn't asked too many questions. Slid on heels she hadn't worn since a friend's wedding 3 years ago. The kind that made her feet scream before she'd even locked the car. Inside the venue, everything sparkled. Crystal chandeliers reflected in mirrored columns. Orchestral music humming under clinking glasses. The room buzzed with important people, smiling for cameras and sipping $1,000 toasts. She felt invisible and overdressed for the wrong war. Then she saw him. Marcus Hale. Not my husband. Not the man who used to clip coupons with her on Sundays or scrape frost from her windshield without being asked. No, this was someone else. Or rather, the version of him she'd mocked. Imagined. Warned would never exist. Except now he did. He stood near the stage, speaking with the mayor. A senator. A group of clean-shaven men in sharp suits and sharper grins. His posture was straighter, his expression looser. Relaxed. Like someone who no longer feared misunderstanding. Every movement economical. No wasted breath. He held a drink in his left hand and gestured with his right like he belonged to the architecture itself. She tried to approach once. Got intercepted by a woman in a silver gown who introduced herself as Marcus's communications advisor. If you'd like to schedule an interview, you can reach out through our office, she said, smiling politely, already turning away. She backed off. Waited. Watched him move. How easily he slipped between conversations, how people leaned in when he spoke, how his name, Marcus Hale, floated like an emblem. Not a question. A brand. Then, near the end, as the crowd thinned and the orchestra softened into silence, he broke away from the cluster of VIPs and walked toward the exit. She followed, heart beating so hard it muffled her breath. She wasn't sure what she'd say, what she even wanted. But as he stepped into the corridor, she called out. Not loudly, not desperately, just enough to make him stop. Marcus. He turned slowly. His eyes settled on her like headlights on a deer. Not cold, not warm, just clinical, like a man pausing before deciding whether to step around a stain on the floor. She stepped closer, hands clenched so tightly her fingernails bit into her palms. Why did you vanish? She asked. Her voice cracked on the last word. Why did you do all this? He tilted his head slightly, considered her. For a brief second, she saw something flicker in his expression. Not regret, not nostalgia, just the faintest twitch of memory, like a forgotten smell in a distant house. But it passed. I didn't vanish, he said finally. You just stopped looking. She opened her mouth to argue. Couldn't. He looked past her then. Not dismissively, just done. Then softly, almost gently, he added, You wanted to be rid of me. You just didn't expect me to take it seriously. He stepped back, hand already reaching for the door. The final blow didn't come in anger. Came in indifference. You never really saw me, he said. So I gave you what you wanted. Someone you'd never recognize. And with that, he pushed the door open. The applause from the ballroom spilled into the corridor, rising like a wave as the MC called his name again. Marcus Hale. Visionary, builder, leader. She stood there alone, wedding photo still hidden in her purse like a worn-out prayer card. The hallway colder now. It wasn't dread she felt. It was something worse. Irrelevance. He hadn't planned to stop. She knew that by the way he kept walking measured, clean steps toward the glowing hallway, where the applause pulsed like a living thing. The crowd waited beyond the double doors, champagne flutes raised, programs folded neatly on laps, his name on their lips. Not hers, but still desperation has a voice all its own. "Please," she whispered, and that one word, tattered, too late, made him pause. He turned. Not fast, not angry, just curious, as if he were observing something from behind glass. A relic from another life, found unexpectedly on the side of the road. He didn't ask what she wanted, didn't fill the silence with politeness or pity, just waited. And that was worse, because the words she'd rehearsed, the accusations, the grief, the angry questions she had sharpened in her throat, they all died in that silence, like they didn't deserve breath. Instead, she just looked at him, not Marcus Hale, not the man in the suit or the man on stage. Him, the man who used to lie beside her with his hands folded on his chest, listening as she vented about her coworkers, the man who made late-night grocery runs because she forgot eggs again, who laughed quietly at dumb movies and paused video games to explain the rules she never cared to learn. He was in there, but buried now, and she had no map to dig him back up. She reached out halfway, a gesture aborted as soon as she made it. "You didn't have to erase everything," she said. "You could have just told me." His lips barely moved. "I did. When?" He blinked slowly. "Every time I spoke and you were already responding." The hallway hummed behind him, someone calling his name again, more urgently now. The kind of call meant for someone important. Someone claimed. Her jaw tightened. "I didn't mean it." "The bet in the kitchen?" he asked, arching an eyebrow. Her mouth opened, then closed, because she remembered it now, not just the words, but the tone, the smirk, the way she hadn't even looked up from her coffee. "If you vanished, no one would notice." A throwaway line, but he hadn't thrown it away. He'd pocketed it, and turned it into a blueprint. He took a slow step toward her, not close enough to touch, just close enough to let the weight of it land. "Because sometimes," he said softly, "silence is the only way to be seen." Then he turned without waiting for a reaction, and walked back into the light. The applause swallowed him whole. Polished shoes on marble. Warm greetings. Flashbulbs. He belonged there now, in a world that spoke his name with reverence, not resentment. A world where her name meant nothing. She stood there long after the doors closed, frozen in place, like an unplugged mannequin in a store display no one visited anymore. No one came to ask if she was all right. No one even noticed her, which, in the end, was the cruelest irony of all. Because when she said it, "If you vanished, no one would notice," she thought it was power. But he turned it into a prophecy, and made sure the only person who'd notice